winning life-changing money. I thought it was going to be brilliant, but it wasn't. It took everything from me. I literally had 50 quid on me, started to play this poker game. Someone next to me said, "Oh, you'll never win it." Picked my cards up and I've just won 127 grand. It led me to 16 years of hell.
How much money do you think you gambled in your life?
Probably between 400,000 and 500,000.
Wow.
Crazy, crazy things I used to do. Sat till 5 o'clock in the morning on my wedding night on this fruit machine. Ended up losing my house, ended up on the streets. And I look back and I think, God, how did it get to that? You know, how?
Lisa, I've read your story and I think that there is a huge stigma, not only around female addiction, but female gambling addiction.
Yeah, you know, when you ultimately think about addiction to gambling, I think most people would think it's men, but that's not the case. And I think as a woman, inside, I had so much going on, being a mum to 2 children, also being a mum to my daughter who's severely disabled, so I'm a full-time carer as well. Mm-hmm. It was an escape. And it wasn't until I was 29 that's when obviously everything changed, when I won the life-changing money.
So talk to me about that moment and what led up to that.
It was just a night out with my sister, 3 other people, going to the Rendezvous Casino in Southend. I literally had 50 quid on me and started to play this poker game they were all playing. And it was a progressive jackpot. So it was on £127,000, but it was going every sort of couple of seconds, it was going up, you know, it was just spinning up. And I remember saying to the dealer, like, how'd you win that? And then someone next to me said, "Oh, you'll never win it. It's like winning the lottery. You've got to get dealt a Royal Flush." The Royal Flush is like the holy grail of cards. And literally 3 hands later, I picked my cards up and I had the 10 Jack, Queen, King, Ace of Diamonds. Wow. And before anyone knew, for that minute, I thought, I'm going to be the most famous person in this casino because I know that I've just won 127 grand. And yeah, the cards flipped over. The casino went ballistic. People were taking pictures of me. The manager come up to me, took me into this office, sat me down, and he said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a full-time carer for my severely disabled daughter." And he said, "Oh my God, this is life-changing money. It's going to be brilliant." And yeah, I thought it was going to be brilliant, but it wasn't.
Do you think that winning that large amount of money was the kind of catalyst for sparking the addiction?
I think 100% for me. It led me to 16 years of hell and back. If I'd have won a couple of £100 that night, you know, like most people go, if they do go to a casino, they might walk out a little bit, you know, winning a little bit, but winning life-changing money. People say about, you know, when they do lines of cocaine or they get drunk or even sex, you know, whatever addiction it is. But for me, nothing beat putting that sort of £100 a spin on or whatever I was betting to try to get that buzz that I needed, I was craving.
So were you gambling regularly before you would say that you became addicted?
I do look at myself and think, you know, from quite a young age, I was exposed to gambling. My dad had an addiction to gambling, but I thought I was in control.
So let's talk about your early life. You just spoke about the fact that your dad was addicted to gambling as well. So you kind of had both the environmental factors influencing you potentially, and also, you know, it could be a genetic factor as well in this.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I say my earliest recollection was when I was about 8, taken to Southend on Sea every year for my holidays, the arcades. And I guess from that early age, I sort of got a buzz from feeding the 2p's into the machine. But it was once I got into sort of teenage years, my dad was gambling too much. And then on my 18th birthday, he took me to Westcliff Casino. And that's where I got my first proper buzz, placing a 50p bet. And that was it. I wasn't ever addicted to gambling then, but I liked it. I liked the buzz it gave me. And then fast forward, I had my 2 children quite young. I was 23 when I had Georgia, 24 when I had Danny. And then Georgia started to get older. We noticed that there was a lot of sort of stuff going on with Georgia. So I was in and out of Great Ormond Street with her. And I think being a young mum and having that huge responsibility on my shoulders, I think going to a bingo hall was like an escape for me.
So at 29, you win this huge amount of money, and this sparks this addiction for you to gambling. What happened when you won that money?
So I went the following week to collect the cheque, and I went anonymous into their local paper because I didn't want anyone to know. And I remember the first time I put my bank card in and I was like 127 grand in credit. And I'm like, oh my God. And I gave my sister £20,000 because she was in a council flat. She bought a caravan, took the kids to Disneyland in America. I done my house up with it, but it was quite quickly that I started to go back to the casino and my bets just got bigger. I found horse tracks, dog racing tracks, Romford dog track. I went,
I've been there.
Yeah, Romford dogs. I actually bought a greyhound to race there.
Wow.
I used to literally drop the kids to school, drive, wherever I could drive to, where people wouldn't know me, so I could gamble. And putting on that mask every night, going home, pretending everything's all right. And inside, you're just dying because you just want that next bet. You just want it so bad.
What does a gambling addiction feel like?
So for me, it was the lights, the buzz. As soon as I fed that money into the machine and I knew every feature, and the buzz that used to give me when I used to press that button and I used to see it spin, and you sort of hold your breath thinking, is this going to be the feature? I think it's the dopamine reward that I'm chasing. I'm chasing that dopamine high and that buzz of like going to collect your winnings and thinking, I've just won 500 quid. And like, look at all these people going to work for like 100 quid a day back then. And I've just won 500 quid in 30 seconds,
So how were you funding the gambling addiction? Were you making the money from the gambling and then kind of re-gambling with that money?
Yeah, so I was working as a teaching assistant, but I also had a lot of equity from my house. So I was remortgaging my house. My dad passed away when he was 55 and he left me a bit of money. And so I could spend £1,000 a day sometimes. But it wasn't, if I was earning 6 figures a year or 7 figures a year, it wouldn't have mattered. I could have won £1 million that day at the casino. Every penny would have gone back.
It's not about the money.
It's not about the money.
How much money do you think you've gambled in your life?
Probably between 400,000 and 500,000.
Wow. Had you accepted the fact that you had an addiction at this point?
Not at all. Not at all. This thing that I'm doing every day, gambling, it was almost like it was my safe place where I could literally go to a bingo hall, be sitting on playing 3 fruit machines at once. Like when I used to go to the toilet, they'd put a sticker on for me to save the machine. What a sad, lonely existence my life was, I had a breakdown of my marriage. When I was 35, I ended up losing my house. I ended up on the streets.
How did you end up losing your house?
I remortgaged it 3 times. And then in the end, I didn't have any more equity. So I lost it. I lost my house. I couldn't afford to pay the repayments or anything. Ended up being in a hostel with Georgia and Danny.
And how old are the kids at this point?
10 and 11.
How did it feel being made homeless and you've got 2 young children? What was that like, experiencing that?
I think the toughest time was when the homelessness officer spoke to me and just said, like, how has this happened? And I just said, I won a lot of money and unfortunately I've gambled it all away. And then her exact words were, I wish you'd been a drug addict or an alcoholic. I don't know what to do with you. And I went to the hostel and a guy come out. I always remember him, the nicest guy ever. And he sat me down in this room and he said, Lisa, he said, we don't see people like you. We don't see people like you. And he said, look, he said, my mum was with me. And he said, I don't want the kids to be here, especially Georgia. And he said, couldn't the kids stay with you? And Lisa can come and see them every day, but she's got to be back here by 8 o'clock at night. It's like a curfew. You've got to be back. And my mum said, of course they can stay with me. She was in a little flat and she took my kids. And that was the hardest thing of a night. I wasn't with my kids for 6 weeks. It was 6 weeks I was there. But this addiction to gambling, it is, it's awful. You know, you think when you know, I was so sensible at school. You know, I never was a follower. I never drank. I never took drugs. You know, I was always good. I was always a good mum. And yet this gambling just got me gripped and I needed to do it. And I look back and I think, God, how did it get to that? You know, how? And it did. Yeah, it was awful. That was one of the worst periods of my life. But I still didn't give up gambling, even after that.
Tell me more about that.
So at 41, I got remarried to Gary, who I'm with now. And I decided that we were going to get married in Las Vegas when I was 45. You know, I planned the whole thing from start to finish. I knew everyone was going to be drinking. I don't drink. I knew everyone was probably going to get drunk. And then I knew that I'd be able to go off and gamble. And that's exactly what I did on my wedding night, in my wedding dress. I got a payday loan out because I'd run out of money. So I got a payday loan from England for £2,000. And I just sat till 5 o'clock in the morning on my wedding night playing on this fruit machine.
Wow. So how did you end up going and, you know, initially trying to get help? What was that moment that you turned things around?
Yeah, I got back home to England and I had to pay this £2,000 loan off. I had to pay it off. And so I rang my son Danny up and I said to him, like, Dan, I need to borrow some money. And he lent me the £2,000 and I went to William Hill and everybody in the shop, everyone knew me in that shop. They all knew my name, they all knew where I lived. They all knew about the money I'd won and I had £2,000 and I put £500, I loaded it onto this machine and it was £100 a spin and the spins take between 20 and 30 seconds. And 4 times I loaded it and within 35 minutes, the £2,000 had gone. And not one person come up to me and just said, are you all right? And I walked out of that shop and if I'd have stepped into the road and a car would have hit me, I wouldn't have cared. I wouldn't have cared at that time because I just thought, like, I'm 45, I've got 2 kids, I've now borrowed money off my son, which I've never done, and I've still got a gambling addiction. And what am I going to, you know, what's going to become of my life? And so I walked back to the car, I picked up my phone, and there was a guy on my phone, it was Alex from Gamblers Anonymous, and I reached out to him, and he just said, are you ready? And I said, I'm ready. And he said, meet me at Basildon tomorrow night. He said, and I want you tonight to go home and tell your mum and your stepdad and Danny everything, because this is it now. And I did. I got them all round. I told them everything.
How did that feel?
I think, in a way, it was a relief. It was a way. It was something that I've been carrying around for so long, and to sit down and actually say, like, I'm talking to you. And my mum just burst out crying. She just burst out crying, and she said, "How, you know, did we not know? How did we not know?"
I think there's something that comes with the honesty and the accountability when you actually do finally tell friends and family and you're honest. Maybe it is that kind of that wake-up call moment that you need to actually accept the reality of what it is, because I think when you're dealing with something alone, you know, you don't necessarily have to face the reality of it.
Exactly, and gambling addiction is so lonely and isolated, and it's so secretive. I wasn't Lisa anymore. I wasn't the bubbly person that I am. It took everything from me, made me into a liar, manipulative. I used to do illegal stuff to fund my addiction. You know, I used to put false plates on my car to go into petrol stations, to take petrol, to get to the casino. Crazy, crazy things I used to do. But when you're in active addiction, you know, that addiction just takes over. It takes over your life. And until you're in that place where nothing else matters apart from placing that bet, you don't understand until you've been there and you hit that rock bottom And I think the only place for then is either death, or you sort of think to yourself, what can I do now to get the help I need? Which, don't get me wrong, the first year was a tough year for me. Tough.
I was going to say, you know, because I've got someone very close to me who's been through an addiction. Healing and recovering is not linear. You don't just walk into one of those meetings and walk out a different person.
No.
It is a lot of work that you have to do on yourself and alongside your friends and family. What was that like?
Really, really hard. I mean, the first, I'd say, 3 months, I was having nightmares about the spinning reels. I could see the rainbow riches, the pots of gold, the mushrooms, everything that I used to play. I was seeing it. I was waking up sweating, thinking, oh my God, have I been playing it? You know, so reliving that constantly. And also, what am I going to do? Because I'm not gambling. I needed to find something that was going to give me a buzz. So I bought myself a puppy. I did. It's almost like your head's like a washing machine, or a tumble dryer, and everything's going round and around and around. And then all of a sudden, one day you wake up and things start to look a bit clearer. Like, I went out one day with a dog and I thought, oh my God, the sun's shining. And I never noticed the sun before. And then all of a sudden, I start to think about, God, what did I do today with Georgia and Danny? I've actually been present. I've actually spent time with them. And I remember what the conversation was. And I started to think, I know I'm getting better. I know I am.
So tell me about New Beginnings.
So when I was in my first year of recovery, Gary and my mum went to Gamanon. It's a meeting that runs alongside Gamblers Anonymous. It's for family and friends to understand the addiction. And poor Gary was sitting with 35 women, and there's me sitting with 35 men. You walk in and people are thinking it's Gary that's the gambler, but it was me. And so then that started getting me thinking about women and gambling, and something was missing. Something was really, really missing. And then I became Betknowmore's first female qualified peer support worker. So then I threw myself into that. And then I went to the CEO of Betknowmore and I said to him, I've got a dream to set up a group called New Beginnings, where women come on Zoom and we talk about everything to do with gambling. So now, 3.5 years later, we are running 3 cohorts a week, 2 health and wellbeing groups a week, and it's just growing and growing and growing. You know, this is so serious now, gambling. It isn't just white men rocking up at a bookies anymore. We know there's about 1.7 million people that already in England, you know, are affected by some way of gambling harms. We're seeing more and more people, because for every person that gambles, there's between 10 and 15 that are affected by that person's gambling, which people don't really think about.
It's like the ripple effect, isn't it?
That's the whole ripple effect.
Because I think the thing is, addicts don't want to be addicts.
No, they don't.
And if they could pull themselves out of this addictive spiral, they would, but they can't.
Exactly. And I think nobody wakes up one morning and thinks, oh, do you know what? I'm going to become an addict today. What is my biggest bugbearer is the gambling adverts on the TV at the moment. They're portrayed as fun, glamorous, glamorised, free bets, free spins. And yet they're not. They're not. You know, the government need to be held accountable, in my eyes as well. So do all these betting companies. Where's your duty of care to the people that are addicted? There's 300 to 400 suicides every year. You know, there shouldn't be one suicide a year through gambling. There shouldn't be any. And something needs to be done about it. And we just need to keep banging on the door.
I agree. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think your story will inspire so many people and show that you can come through dark times. There is light at the end of the tunnel. You just got to find it.
You definitely can. There's definitely light. And remember, there's always hope. Always. Never give up.